Garrett what?
Yo, we have one. Daddy.
What? Is Garrett the cutest boy?
Yes.
Love ya.
Love you too.
Hi, we're Scott and Julie Halpert, the co-founders of Garrett Space. Our precious son Garrett took his life 4 years ago when he was 23. We never would have imagined that this could happen to our child and to our family.
Welcome to My Healthy Mind. I'm Michael Hunter. In the last few years, suicide rates in this country have reached what experts now recognize as epidemic levels across all age groups, but especially among children and young adults. Why? Why the widespread loss of hope? Why the overpowering despair? Why the crippling fear or simple soul-numbing apathy about the future? Why the decision to take that one irreversible step? And why haven't we been able to stop this? Today we'll address these and other questions faced by a family who has experienced those questions firsthand and struggled to find the answers. Julie Halpert, welcome to My Healthy Mind.
Thank you.
Julie, let me begin by expressing my sincere condolences for your loss. And as a parent, I can just imagine how painful that must be.
Yes, and thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And when someone loses a child to suicide, it can be very difficult to talk about, and they often don't want to talk about it. And other people don't know how to or if they should talk about it with grieving families. Yet you've chosen to share your story and your grief today. Why is that?
Well, I think that there is a lot of stigma attached to losing someone, losing a child who dies by suicide. And we feel very strongly, my husband Scott and I, that we need to talk about this. And those who have lost a child this way, it's incredibly painful. And to suffer in silence is horrible. And we feel like there needs to be a lot of support for families, and we want to be open about it because we're not ashamed, and we want people to talk about this issue and get it out in the open.
Well, thank you for your courage and your generosity. That insight is definitely valuable. So let's talk about Garrett. What was he like?
Well, Garrett was just the most incredible person that you would ever meet. And I say this not because I'm his mother, but because people have told us that. Shortly after Garrett passed, we had constantly had people coming up to us saying, you know, Garrett helped me through a crisis. Garrett was always there for me. He was amazing. Garrett was extremely bright. He was an amazing athlete. He was among the top tennis players in his class in the state. And he was an amazing poet as well, and funny and kind, had lots of friends. He always made you feel like you were the only person in the room when you were with him. He always listened to what you had to say, and he was always reaching out to people who were really struggling. Even though he himself had been struggling, he really found it, part of his calling was really to help others. I remember shortly after he passed away that a woman who was his age said that he recently reached out to her on Facebook and said that he was sorry she was bullied. He didn't bully her, but he just wanted her to know that he felt badly about that. When he was in middle school, there was a friend of his who was being bullied who had Tourette's. Kids were making fun of him. And Garrett, as a 7th grader, stepped in and said, "Leave him alone, it's just allergies." I mean, he had this sense of right and wrong and the confidence to try to right the wrongs. He was just incredibly kind and loved by his friends and family, and he had tons of friends, very social, and attractive, and all the characteristics you would think would make for a happy life. So on the outside, Garrett was just this, it seemed like he had it all going on, right? He had a great sense of humor, super fun to be around. Everybody adored him. He took this life in like every day was his last in some ways, and he just loved the world and nature and people. But inside, he was a very sensitive person. The world became very harsh, and he, in the end, I think his heart was just too big for this world. And we have heard since Garrett's passing about tragically, many other young adults who were incredibly, just remarkably so much like Garrett. They seemed to have everything going for them, but they were such kind, sensitive souls. And they took in the harshness of the world so much that it was hard for them to continue living.
And as he was living that life, you said he struggled as well. What were his struggles like?
Well, I think he actually started as when he was very young, he had really major temper tantrums, which we thought were just toddler tantrums, terrible twos. And as he got closer into like kindergarten, he continued to have these kind of tantrums. And we actually intervened and got him help at a very early age. We were worried about it. And it was like he took things very seriously. He couldn't shake things off. So if there was an unfair call, like in a soccer game, whereas other kids would be like, let's just move on. Things really got to him. He took things in. He took things in in a very hard way. And he was small for his age, and he felt insecure about that as he got older. He just had these internal struggles throughout his life.
Did he have any formal mental health diagnosis during those struggles?
I don't think he was ever officially diagnosed with anything. He was definitely depressed throughout his, he had up and down periods. I mean, lots of up periods, but definitely had issues with depression, and he doesn't officially receive, a diagnosis like bipolar or anything like that. He had periods of, I would say, sad and down times.
And how was the rest of the family dynamic with Allie and Madeline and your family, and how you work together as a nucleus?
We were a very close family. We still are a very close family. He's the middle, and he's got sisters 3 years younger and 3 years older. And we always went on family vacations. The kids were always really close with each other, helped each other through a lot of hard times. Our kids, all of them, including Garrett, weren't afraid to tell us when they were struggling. We have a very open, accepting, we like to think we're open and accepting, and let them know that we were there for them. And this really, as you can imagine, really devastated us. It's, there are scars that we'll have the rest of our life because part of our nucleus is gone now.
Next time you need to see a doctor, don't go to a doctor. Call Team Wellness Online. With Team Wellness Online, you can see a doctor or a therapist without waiting, usually within 24 hours. Your televisit is private and 100% secure, and you can take all the time you want. So next time you need to see a doctor or therapist, call Team Wellness Online at 888-813-TEAM to make a virtual appointment, and we'll come to you.
How did the family respond to what was happening with Garrett, noticing that there was something?
That's a very good question. I think there was tension and stress at times because, if he was really troubled, that's a stressor, right? And that can be pretty traumatic. Like I said, the way we dealt with it was that from the very earliest stages, we intervened and got him help. I remember when he was very young, elementary school, I told his pediatrician, I said, I need a recommendation of a therapist. Something isn't right here. And she was kind of brushing it off like, he's moody, he's, whatever, he'll be fine. And I really do feel like he was helped in many ways by really good mental health professionals who helped him learn how to cope. By the time he was in high school, and that's why this is so very sad, by the time he was in high school, he was really living a wonderful life. He had gotten great help from an incredible social worker who helped him to learn how to deal with his emotions. He didn't have, his tempers really definitely dissipated, I would say, certainly after elementary school. That was just a brief period in his young life. And he was very chill. He also, learned to help himself by meditating and doing yoga. He was very into these holistic measures to help him cope with stressful times.
That was pretty insightful as a parent to say he may need therapy back when that was happening. So would you say that parents should actively act on their instinct, and even if the pediatrician doesn't see it so clearly yet?
Well, hopefully your physicians will be supportive, and I did adore a pediatrician, but I think if you as a parent have an instinct that something isn't right, there's just no downside if your child is willing to do it, to get help. And from the very earliest of ages, our son was very receptive to therapy. He wanted to get help to be happier. And he had the insight himself to realize that even at a very young age. So it was never a fight to get him to see somebody. He was very happy to do that. And it was ultimately very helpful to him.
And then the unimaginable happened, and your middle child, 23 years old, completed suicide. How did you get through that?
Well, it was the most devastating thing you can ever imagine. And, we just, I remember among the first things that happened was that my husband hugged me and said, "We're going to get through this together." And he was my rock and I was his rock. And the girls, we all sort of came together to support each other. And one thing that really helped my husband Scott and I, is that we really were there for each other. Shortly after our son died, a friend of ours, or someone we became friends with, who lost her son to suicide a few years earlier, said to us that 80% of those of people who lose a child those marriages end in divorce. And she said, you have to take care of each other. You have to be there for each other. And when we get into the blame game, and a lot of marriages that were rocky to begin with, they don't survive. And we were committed because of my husband and I. We're like, in a rocky boat in a stormy sea, and we are the only ones together in that boat who know what this feels like. And that has been infinitely helpful to me in moving forward. Also, having amazing daughters who we know we have to be there for. Sometimes parents, they'll fall apart, and then the child will have lost a sibling and a parent. And we were just intent on making sure that that was not going to happen to us. And we had an amazingly supportive community. There's a tradition in Jewish religion called sitting Shiva, where people come after the funeral for a period of days. I think we had close to 1,000 people at Garrett's funeral, and we had hundreds of people every day coming by. And many of those people stuck around, meaning they didn't just drop off. They're still in our lives. They're still checking in on us. It's very difficult to get through. And were it not for my husband and our daughters and having that tight bond and knowing we needed to be there for each other, I don't really know how I would have done it, to be honest with you.
And so you drew a lot of strength and understanding from each other and your religion, it sounds.
Yeah, probably my husband, I would say, was more, he grew up more religious than I did, and there's a tradition in Jewish religion where you say a prayer called the Kaddish. You're supposed to say it every day, go to services and say it every day after your child passes away. And my husband did it almost every single day, and he was in a community of mourners, and that was really helpful to him. I went sometimes, but not as much. I would say it was really more the strength, the community we have. I have an amazing sister who also, and Scott's siblings were great too. So we have this really tight-knit family, and then we have lots and lots of amazing friends that really helped us, people we could turn to. And of course, I was already seeing a therapist, and I continued seeing a therapist, and I really don't know how anybody could have this happen and not get professional help.
Your insight in this vision blows my mind. And I'm sure it's going to be very helpful to many, many families.
Well, we hope so.
Yeah. Let's take a look at and celebrate Garrett's life.
I'm not alone. 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 I'm not alone, I'm not alone, I'm not alone. I forgot for a minute who I belong to. The Mama Earth, the wind and rain, the beauty and the pain. I'm not alone. For me, the world was created. I'm not alone. To dust I will return.
If you're having any kind of mental health crisis, we can help. At Team Wellness Crisis Centers, you'll be seen immediately, stabilized in our own private facility, and given all the care you need to get better. Don't wait. Call the Team Wellness Helpline at 1-888-813-TEAM. It could be your lifeline.
So tell us about Garrett's space.
So when Garrett was struggling, we were looking for a place that he could go to get support. The ER, the psych ER, is of course where you should go if you're actively suicidal, but it is not designed to help you in the long term. And one of the people who is on our board of directors, Victor Hong, runs the psych ER at Michigan Medicine, and he is one of our biggest supporters because he knows that. We were looking for that middle place, like if you need a place where you need more than once or twice weekly visits to your therapist, but you don't want to go to the psych ER. Where do you go? And at one point our son was like wanting to go to a meditation retreat, and he just wanted a warm, welcoming place. And we both were standing by his grave one day when, honestly, at the same time this idea came to us, like, let's create this holistically focused, warm space. I mean, when you hit bottom for drug addiction, there's lots of welcoming spaces. There isn't like mental health rehab there's not like a rehab space for mental health. We wanted to create that. And so the first thing that we did is we said, did we miss something? Was there something like this out there and we weren't aware of? And within a few months of his passing, we started talking to people. And if you can imagine, we were still grieving. And it was really hard. We were almost afraid we'd find it, that we'd miss something. And I remember someone who would run a shelter for homeless children had said, you didn't miss it. This doesn't exist and we need this. She said your community has failed you. I don't see it that way. But we felt like there's a huge gap and we're gonna fill it. So what Garrett Space is, our vision for Garrett Space is it will be a holistically focused place where young adults ages 18 to 28, a population that's not well served right now, who are struggling severely with mental health issues, can go for 2 to 3 week stays. And we'll provide a cocoon of support. It will be located in nature with walking paths and gardens, animals, and then we'll have things our son found to be helpful: meditation, yoga, music, poetry, journaling, healthy cooking, which shows the mind-body connection, eating healthy, feeling healthy, so that young adults, and also very importantly, help for broken relationships. A broken relationship for a young adult, especially a romantic relationship, can be like a death to a young adult. And yet they feel sometimes devastated and they don't know what to do. Also help for families. Families who have young adults often feel like they're navigating this on their own. We were well educated and well resourced, and we felt like we didn't know anything and where to turn. And so this will be a place where we'll have a caring facilitators and mental health workers, social workers, who will just be there and show, and also peer support, and show young adults that they're not alone in their struggles and that they can get through this. And what we've done, since the space isn't going to be available right away, is we have started wellness programming. It's virtually for now. We started it a year ago, where young adults meet weekly for a support group with peers and a mood and movement class. And we are already starting to roll out our second cohort. It's been extremely successful. This is not in lieu of therapy, it's an adjunct support. But again, young adults are feeling like they're supporting each other, they're showing they're not alone. We have, of course, a social worker who oversees this, and she just is blown away by how amazing and how successful this has already been.
You have such a remarkable story. We really appreciate your being here today. What would you say as a final thought to the people watching?
I would say two things. The first is, if you have the least inkling that your child is struggling, seek out help. Help is there. There are many amazing resources, people who can help you to get the help you need. And the second really is, for young adults, know that you're not alone in your struggles and that you can get better. That's really, for us, the most important message that we want to impart.
I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I'm not alone.
Anxiety, depression can happen to anyone for all kinds of reasons, especially during difficult and trying times that no one should have to go through alone. At Team Wellness, trained, compassionate, caring professionals will get you into the right treatment so you get better. Team Wellness. You are not alone.
So one of the most important things that we can all do to prevent suicide is to be educated, to get training. Most of us are familiar with trainings like CPR, how to support someone facing a cardiac crisis. Most people are not familiar or aware that there are trainings for how to help somebody facing a suicide crisis. So one of those trainings, which I'm an instructor for, is called QPR, and that acronym stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. One of the first things we do is we go over the myths and facts about suicide, because suicide is not something we often speak about in public discourse. There are many misconceptions, many myths that get perpetuated. So we kind of try to break those down. But starting with that first step is question. Simply asking the question, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? And we need to be that direct. We don't want to beat around the bush. We want that person to know that we're okay talking about this. That this is something that we're not ashamed to talk about, that this people face crises in life, and at certain times, for certain people, they might have thoughts that maybe I would be better off if I weren't here. So we need to be bold in asking the question. And then I usually, in trainings, ask this question after we ask somebody a question in life in general: what's our next job? And that's really to listen. And so that next step in the action plan, persuade, that's the best way we can persuade someone to accept our help. The best way we can persuade someone to stay here is really to listen. And I would say listen with empathy. So one way to listen with empathy is reflective listening. So active listening, where even just using skills like repeating back to that person what they've said to you does a great job of portraying understanding, portraying that you are seeing, hearing what they're going through, and then just validating. So when we're questioning, when we're persuading, we really want to be completely non-judgmental. And then the last step, R, stands for refer, and I'll tie this back to that CPR analogy. So if somebody's applying bystander CPR, they're doing that until the professional medical supports come in and provide more life-saving support. So with QPR, it's the same thing. By asking the question, by persuading and listening, we're providing life-safe support, but we also need to tie in professional supports as well. So that's where the last step, refer, comes in. We want to get them connected to counseling. We want to get them connected to mental health treatment. And we know, studies show that for individuals facing mental health conditions, receiving treatment is a huge protective factor. So that's a crucial step in that action plan.
Thank you for watching today as we shared one family's heart-rending story of loss, courage, love, and the greatest of all, hope. If you'd like to learn more about this or any mental health issue, visit us on our website at myhealthymind.com, on Facebook at My Healthy Mind Show, or on Twitter. Please make note of the many support groups and suicide prevention resources there. We'll see you next week for another edition of My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it.
If someone you know is exhibiting warning signs for suicide, don't be afraid to ask if he or she is depressed or thinking about suicide. Listen without judging. Encourage them to seek professional help. If the friend or loved one appears to be extremely distressed, don't leave that person alone. Try to keep the person as calm as possible and get immediate help. Call 988 or take the person to an emergency room. If you yourself are having suicidal thoughts, know that you are not alone. Also know that help is available 24/7. You can call your healthcare provider, go to the emergency room, or call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
Until recently, people in psychiatric crisis had very few options. Basically, they could be taken to a hospital emergency room and inpatient treatment, or to jail. But now, there's a better way. Team Wellness Psychiatric Urgent Care Center of Metro Detroit, an official certified community behavioral health clinic. What this means is that now, people experiencing any kind of mental health or substance abuse crisis can be taken immediately and directly into treatment at our safe, certified crisis stabilization unit, to be immediately assessed, stabilized, and triaged by our team of intake medical doctors and psychiatrists, to undergo intensive psychiatric therapy for up to 23 hours in one of our private or semi-private rooms, to be fully evaluated for short-term care and given a warm handoff into proper ongoing treatment, and to receive continuing long-term clinical and peer support services based on a thorough, thoughtful discharge plan drawn up case by case. For those in the throes of a substance abuse crisis, our response would be the effective, evidence-based practice for treating substance abuse, including Suboxone. In cases of attempted suicide, certified suicide prevention specialists are on call, and our mobile crisis response team ready for dispatch. In any mental health emergency, our Psych Urgent Care unit is open 24/7 to receive and treat those in crisis. And in all these cases, law enforcement can bring subjects to Team Wellness to divert from jail or the emergency room. This kind of direct access will save time and save lives. Team Wellness Psychiatric Urgent Care. Certified, safe.